Bruce, it's great to have you on the show. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. So for the audience, for the people that don't know you too well, for those that do know you and they're listening to this episode, they know that you're pretty much the guru guide to go to when it comes to behavioral analysis. But for those that don't really know who you are, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into behavioral analysis?
Okay. So my name is Bruce Jacobs. I'm a retired police officer from Wisconsin, and I started studying behavioral analysis in the early 2000s. I went to a breakout session on a juvenile conference. And a breakout session I stumbled into was on microexpressions. And I had never heard of a microexpression before. I didn't know what it was. And I got to tell you, I walked in that class and it changed my life. I was so amazed at what I could see and what I could tell about somebody's feelings, their true feelings, no matter what they were saying, based on a fifth of a second burst of expression that comes across their face. And these tells or the leakage that we're going to talk about is caused by the limbic brains, limbic. It's your survival brain. It's your fight, flight, or freeze brain. It's kept you alive. So I go to this class and I'm all excited about these micro expressions. Like I said, I was just amazed. So I come back to the department and I tell everybody about it and I start studying. I look into it and I find out there's so much more than just micro expressions. There's actually 5 different channels of communication. So we have your micro expressions, the fifth of a second burst of emotion, true emotion that comes across your face that you don't even know you're doing. We have body gestures. I'm talking about the way you tilt your head, the way you nod your head or shake your head, your shoulders, your arms, your fingers, your thumbs are very important. The thumbs, your torso, your legs, your feet, your toes, they all mean different things and they're all driven by your limbic brain. So these are signs not caused by nervousness, because nervousness is not a sign of deception. So we have micro expressions, body gestures, it's your voice. So the pitch, the tone, the volume, the inflection, and the flow of your voice. When I talk to somebody, I get a baseline voice between 1 and 5, 3 being their baseline. So when they go up a little bit or up a little bit, I notice it. Sometimes they're talking and they'll lower their voice a little bit, and then all of a sudden they'll lower it so low that you can't understand what they're saying. So they're going from a 3 to a 4 to a 5, or from a 3 to a 2 to a 1. So it's your voice. It's also your physical changes that happen that are caused by your limbic brain. You may get dry mouth. And we'll talk later about all the ancient lie detector tests. Most of them are based on the limbic brain. They didn't know it back then. But it's the saliva, getting a dry mouth when you're lying. You may turn beet red. You may turn pitch white. I mean, why would you turn pitch white? It's because your limbic brain has pumped the blood away from your extremities, including your arms and your face, into the large organs and muscles getting ready to run or fight. Okay? And it's also something called SCAN, scientific content analysis, which is the scientific meaning of the words that you choose. So I started studying it, and a couple years later, in my city, I retired from the city of Manitowoc. We've been made famous by, unfortunately, a Netflix series called Making of a Murderer. It's about a man, Stephen Avery, who was convicted of a brutal rape that he didn't commit. Spent 17 years in prison. He got out, and a year and a half later, he killed a woman on the salvage yard where his family owned and everybody lived on their property on October 31st, 2005. Why do criminals talk, right? Why do guilty people talk? It's illogical. But Freud talks about we as humans have a deep need to say the sentence, I did it. So people want to talk. And they're spilling out information. They're leaking. So my website is Leaking the Truth. And I say that they leak information, and they really do. So Stephen Avery's being interviewed by the news camera. And they said, well, Mr. Avery, was Teresa Halbach out here? And he laughs and he goes, yeah, she was out here, but I don't know if I'm a suspect. And the hair in the back of my neck stood up. I'd been at a homicide investigation school, and I saw a video of a man from, I believe it was California, in his 50s. He was standing in his driveway, and the police were at the house next door where a 7-year-old girl was kidnapped, was just missing. So the cameras come over. Hey, do you know this little girl? Yeah, she lives right there, but I don't know if I'm a suspect. And he was the suspect. He had kidnapped her, and he killed her. So when Stephen Avery said that, I mean, think about it. Would you say that you were a suspect if you weren't a suspect? You
Still,
must be thinking that you're a suspect.
yeah,
So he said that. I specifically remembered I got off the couch, I got really close to the TV, and I'm just watching them. And then the reporter goes, "Well, Mr. Avery, there's crime scene tape around the fire pit." And he goes, "Well, I don't know why that would happen. I hadn't had a fire for months," which was a lie. But I looked at that and I watched it and I looked at my then wife and I said, "That guy's guilty and it's got something to do with that fire pit." Because when he said it, when he got introduced to that stimulus of the crime scene tape around the fire pit, he had a limbic brain response and his eyes started to twitch until he got control of it. So micro expression, and then he was able to say, "Well, I don't know why that would be," but it was too late because the leakage already happened. So that's actually where he burnt her body. So when we found that all out, I found all out. I mean, I was all in on the behavioral analysis stuff. So I've been studying it for 22 years now, or 23 years. It's amazing how many things you can pick up from people.
yeah, yeah. No, there's a lot of, and there's a reason why. So good investigators understand that information, the conversation is not just what somebody's verbally telling you. I think there's like 65% of the conversation that's happening through nonverbal cues, right?
Oh, at
Some
least, at
at
least, yes,
minimum, right? And so they're telling you something because that's what they want to blurb out to you, but then the rest of the communication is happening nonverbal. So
right.
yeah, that is so interesting. It's funny that you bring up some of these cases, because I remember one specifically. It's also on Netflix. I can't. The guy's name is like Christopher something. He ended up like killing his wife and his
Yeah, Chris Watts,
Chris
Chris
Watts.
Watts,
Yeah,
right from
exactly.
Colorado. Yep, he killed his pregnant wife and his two little girls. I think they were both under 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, yeah, and one of the videos that particularly stood out to me when I was looking at the documentary, was when they're at the neighbor's house. The police officer, one of them come over. Hey, is there any video cameras? Obviously, doing kind of the standard scene canvas, securing the scene, looking at all that stuff. They walk over to the neighbor's house, like, yeah, I have cameras, and he's standing right there next to the TV as they're looking at the cameras, and then at some point, he like puts his hands up, and
Yep.
you could see like his torso is like like he
Yes.
has
His
like
breathing changed.
trouble breathing, right? And the whole time that he's talking to them, he's like responding, but he has his arms up like this. Why
Yep.
would
Wrapped around his head.
somebody,
Right.
yeah, why would
I
somebody like that?
Yep. I have that
That's
video. I know exactly what you're talking about. What happened was he was over there with the police officer and the neighbor, and he was saying stuff, and the neighbor's camera proved him wrong. And
yeah,
that's when he put his head above, hands above his head, and his behavior changed. He knew that all his story was falling apart because what he was trying to say was proven false because the guy's camera was right there, showing that it didn't happen the way he did. What was
yeah,
interesting was there's a couple of different news cameras that come and interview him. One of the interviews is on his front porch, and the other one is in front of his garage. As he's talking on the garage one, he's talking about the cameras, and he goes, "Well, I saw them when they got in last night. I just have a camera," and he points over his shoulder. I just have a camera there, and then he points across the street, so we don't really know at that point what he's pointing at. And he says, "In the neighbor's camera." And when he says it, he has a disgust micro expression. And when I saw that the first time, I thought, well, why is he disgusted with the neighbor's camera? I didn't view the body cam video of the officer of them over there while the
yeah,
neighbor went through his video. And then the reporter goes, "Well, what do you mean? What cameras?" And he goes, "I just have one there, and the neighbor's camera." And he has the same disgust look on his face, a fifth of a second, when he points to the neighbor's camera.
yeah. That's so interesting. It's so
So I mean,
fascinating. Yeah,
it's like, why is he disgusted, right? So you start digging into this. When you're interviewing somebody, you look for hot spots, right? So you may have your idea of where your investigation's going, and all of a sudden you see these hot spots, this leakage, these tells, these clues, and you think, well, what's that all about? So there's some sensitivity there. So you may ask me something about this case, and then I'll say something like, as I'm talking, and I'll go, "Well, Mr. Jones was over there, and but then I went over here and I did this and I that." So I lowered my voice. You can't see me right now, but I look down and away. That's a hot spot for you. Why am I looking down and away, which is universal shame, and why am I lowering my voice?
Yeah.
So there's something going on with Mr. Jones that I don't want you to know.
Yeah.
So then you come back to that question. Let's talk about Mr. Jones. Tell me about Mr. Jones. And then you'll uncover information that you didn't even know existed.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's talk about a baseline. What is a baseline and how do you determine one?
So your baseline is the behaviors that you do. Okay. Some people they have different behaviors. So like I said, nervousness is not a sign of deception. So people's baseline is what they do all the time. Their baseline voice, their baseline cadence and flow. So this is my baseline cadence and flow. And all of a sudden you may ask me a question and I may go, uh, uh, huh? Right? So everything changed. My flow changed from my baseline. I may talk with my hands in front of me, which a lot of people do. And all of a sudden, my hands go way out to my side. It's called being outside the presentation zone. So we look for consistencies and inconsistencies from baselines. Now, it helps to have the baseline, but there are certain leakage that you don't need the baseline for. And this leakage is all about emotions. It's emotions. So some of the leakage that you have is appropriate for the context of what you're saying or what the conversation is. And then some of it isn't. And I'll give you some examples about that when we talk more about the micro expressions.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your
So
baseline, yep. And there's baseline questions. So when I talk to people, I ask them baseline questions to get an eye pattern movement. So you should be moving your eyes a certain way when you're remembering things, right? So I'll ask them questions that have nothing to do with the case to get them to remember what I'm asking them to remember. So then I can say in my report that I established a baseline eye movement of recalling or remembering up and to the right or up and to the left.
yeah, yeah. No, and I'm glad that you touched on that because that was going to be my next question is, you know, what are some for people listening to this and they're not used to establishing a baseline and they're interviewing somebody in person, what are some type of questions that they could ask where they know the person's going to be truthful and they can establish that baseline to be able to detect any deviations
Yeah.
once you start going
Yeah.
into the other type of questions.
So you can ask any question. I'll give you some examples, but you can ask any question that you want that doesn't have anything to do with the case that's going to make them remember things. So here's an example. One of my first questions, I look at them and I smile at them and I said, okay, listen, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. They have nothing to do with the case. Just please answer them, the best of your ability. You're like, yeah, okay. So I look at them and I smile and I go, do you like McDonald's? Okay, so some people like McDonald's and some people hate McDonald's. I can
Yeah.
tell that by the micro expression that they have because I just hit them with a stimulus, right? It doesn't matter what their answer is, yes or no. It doesn't because I'm going to ask them a follow up question, and they're going to say no, or they're going to say yes, right? So everybody knows where the McDonald's is, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all over the place. My next question is where's the nearest McDonald's to your house? And so they have to remember where it is. And most people will look up either to the right or to the left to remember it. So now I can put in a report that now I know that when he remembers things, when he recalls things, he's going to look this way. And then I may ask a question like, do you know the national anthem? And they're like, yeah. Okay. So what's the 10th word in the national anthem? Well, I don't know. I'm like, well, how would you know? Well, I have to sing it. Well, go ahead and sing it to yourself. And boom, their eyes will go exactly where they did the last time because they're remembering things. So they'll look at me and then they'll come back with the answer. And then the last question I may ask would be, do you went to high school, right? I'm like, yeah. Did you have a favorite teacher in high school? Now, this is an interesting one because sometimes people don't look at all. They look directly at my eye and go, oh, yeah, it was Mr. Jones. You're right. They don't have to think about it. So they had no eye movement. They directly looked at me. If they have to think about it, they're going to look up in that same direction. So now I've established an eye pattern movement based on questions that have nothing to do with the case. As I'm asking them questions about, hey, what happened next? What happened next? And then they deviate from that, deviate from their baseline of remembering things. That's a clue for me.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying at that point, but there's something going on in their head that there's more information that they don't want to give me.
Yeah, yeah. And to add, I mean, even like their body posture too, right? Like if you have somebody sitting right in front of you and they're like standing up straight, they're engaged in the conversation, then you ask a particular question and then all of a sudden they like
Yeah.
go back like
Yeah.
this.
They lean
It's
away.
they're
Yep.
they're, they're leaning away from that question.
So our limbic brain makes us lean towards things that we like and lean away from things that we don't like. So if you look at a picture, I go on Facebook and I don't post on Facebook, but I'll look at pictures on Facebook and I'll grab them off of there and I'll blot out the name of the faces and stuff like that. And I'll put them onto my app and I'll push them out to all the people that got the app and say, what's going on in this picture? Based on the feet, based on the shoulders, based on the hands and the thumbs and the fingers, and based on how people are leaning. Okay.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is a gesture retreat. Very common when someone is lying. They will talk to you, they'll push away, they'll push away from the lie, they'll push away from the table.
Yeah.
So gesture retreat, that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, it's that's so interesting. I remember just briefly a case when I used to work for one of these major insurance companies on auto claims, and I was investigating a vehicle theft. So there was
Okay.
this guy that reported that he came back home the night before. His truck, it was an Escalade, like $80,000, and it was parked right outside his home by the corner. That's the last time that he saw his truck. Um, Next day, he stayed indoors. The following day, he stayed indoors. It was like he arrived on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he stayed indoors. Then
Hmm.
Monday, he comes out in the morning and his truck is no longer there, according to him. Well, I already knew by the time that that I was interviewing him that his truck had actually been out in Mexico and never came back on Thursday. So there was no way for him to see his truck on Friday. There's just no way.
Yeah.
I knew from the beginning he was lying to me, but I still wanted to question him and see what he was going to tell me. And it was interesting when I asked him about his truck, and I said, "Hey, when's the last time that you last saw your vehicle again?" And he said, "Friday." I said, "What time?" He said, "Well, when I came back home." "What time did you come back home?" 6 p.m. Okay. Um, and then once I asked, "Have you ever driven your vehicle out of the country?" And he goes from this position to he said,
Leading way back.
No, I haven't." I'm like, okay, let me narrow that question down a little bit more. Did you drive your vehicle out of the country within the last week prior to your car going missing? And he stays back and he's like, no. And he starts doing this with his shirt.
Yep.
And so I knew he was
So what
lying
you're
because
doing right now
yeah,
is what you just did is called ventilating.
yeah,
So your body heat is building because your blood pressure is going up because he knew that you had him.
yeah,
So he goes for his collar and he starts ventilating. It's
yeah,
a limbic brain response. Okay,
yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. Well, he essentially, confessed that he's the one that got rid of the truck, and that's kind of where the conversation went to. Once I confront him and say, "Hey, look, I know you're not being truthful with me. This is, you drove your vehicle out to Tijuana on Thursday. Uh, you never drove back with it, and I know it was you because here's a picture of you crossing the border
Oh,
on the way
nice.
back."
Yeah.
Um, and so you never saw your vehicle on Friday. Your vehicle was not here on Friday. What did you do with the truck? And that was now kind of a different conversation at that point. But it's so interesting when you were mentioning this of like how they, people would distance away from the question and would start
Mhm.
ventilating. So if somebody that, doesn't necessarily have the full on training to be looking for these cues, maybe hasn't, done it for a while, what are maybe the top 3, 4 things that they could be looking for? Because there's a ton of things, right? You mentioned the arms, the
Right.
legs, the thumbs, the face, like, there's a lot of things, but if you could narrow it down to just a couple, what are some things that people should be looking for if they wanna
Mhm.
see some of those deviations?
So it's not only looking, it's also listening, right? Because we're listening for things. So my number one thing that I look for, number one tell, the leakage, is called a contempt smile. Some people call it a smirk. Now, in behavioral analysis, things have to be synchronized and symmetrical. So, a contempt smile is a asymmetrical, a non-symmetrical facial expression. They pull one corner of their mouth up. It means social superiority. So, it's emotion. It's not deception. It's only deception based on the context of when it happens. And this is what I'll give you a perfect example. So I got a video of Joe Mazzulla. Joe Mazzulla is the Boston Celtics basketball coach. He's being interviewed after the game. The reporter says, "Coach, did you get a chance to see the royal family?" He goes, "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph?" And the reporter laughs and she goes, "No, no. The royal family from Wales, the king and queen, they were here for the game." He goes, "No, no, I only know one royal family." And he's got a big contempt smile, single-sided, right? That's perfect because he's proud of his answer. Okay, social superiority. A contempt smile means you're proud of it. Social superiority. Then I got a video of another guy who's talking about his wife not making it to work. So he's talking to the news cameras and his friends are around him. And he's talking like, "Well, I got home at this time and I didn't wake her up, or she didn't wake me up because of, and I went to bed and she got up and she didn't wake me up because of just being being courteous to me. And then I got up and I called into work," and he starts crying, but he has a contempt smile. He didn't really cry. He kind of like faked it, but he has a contempt smile. So why is he proud of what he's talking about, his wife disappearing? And then he goes, "And she didn't make it." And he's crying, but he's got a contempt smile. Great clues.
Hmm.
Why is he proud of his wife not making it to work? Because he killed her. And he just told us that with the contempt smile. So again, it's emotion. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's only deception based on the context of when it happens.
Yeah.
So contempt is my number one.
Okay.
My number two, my number two is a single-sided shoulder shrug, asymmetrical shoulders. So as people are talking, their shoulders will either tilt down and stay like that, or it'll raise up. So picture yourself doing the "I don't know," right? Both shoulders come up, like "I don't know." A single-sided is just what it is. It's one. And it means I have no confidence in what I just said. All right. So you could say, "Did you take this?" And I guarantee you, Chris, if you would have had that on video, there'd be other tells, other leakage that happened when he pushed back and he said no.
Yeah.
He may have shaken his head yes. He may have had the single-sided shoulder shrug. He may have looked down and away. His voice may have lowered. There was other tells there that you just weren't aware of. So number one for me is contempt. Number two is a single-sided shoulder shrug. Again, it means I have no confidence in what I just said to you. And number three for me is the inappropriate head nod. I see it all the time. People are like, I just did some training today, and I showed them a video of Richard Nixon. For those of us who know who Richard Nixon is, he was an ex-president involved in the Watergate scheme, and he's doing this speech, and he goes, um, he goes, uh, uh, I've earned everything I've got, and he's shaking his head no. He goes, "I'm not a crook." He shakes his head yes. "I've earned everything I've got," and he shakes his head no. So that's the leakage that I'm talking about, because our brains are wired not to lie, but when we lie, there's a conflict between our cognitive thinking of "I have to lie" and our emotional feelings of "I'm not supposed to lie," and
Yeah.
it causes conflict. It causes leakage.
Yeah.
So those are my top three. Number four is voice. So your pitch, tone, volume, your inflection, and your flow. So you may ask somebody, you may ask me, "What'd you do yesterday, Bruce?" And I would say, "I was walking the dog," right? You're going to write it down, walking the dog. But did you hear what I said? I
There's
had
a
an
little, there's
inflection
a,
of a question mark. Yes,
almost
my
like you were
tone.
asking yourself whether you were
Right.
walking the
I'm
dog.
not sure. Well, he said he was walking the dog. Yeah, I did say that, but there was other clues in there. Okay, so pitch, tone, volume, the inflection, and the flow that go. So I talked about before about the volume, getting the baseline volume between 1 and 5, 3 being their baseline. When you go up, or you're up, or you go down, you're down, then you can pick that up. And you have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? What's the context of why they're doing it? Okay, those are great clues. And number 5 for me is language. Listening to pronouns, changing of pronouns, or missing pronouns. Like, "What'd you do yesterday?" "Got up, took a shower, drove to work." Right? Who drove to work? You're doing an investigation on a car. Tell me what happened. "Driving down the road, went over the hill, the truck ended in a ditch." Right? Okay, so did you file a claim? The guy goes, "Yeah." "Well, which vehicle?" "My truck." Okay, so tell me again what happened. Going down the road, went over the hill, the truck ended in a ditch. So there's a whole lot of clues there. First of all, he goes driving down the
Swerving, yeah.
road, driving down the road. No pronouns. Who's driving down the road? I, we, they, driving down the road. Went over the hill, and the truck ended in the ditch. Did you file a claim? Yep. Which vehicle? My truck. So now I'm changing the to my. Distancing for that accident. Now I want to get paid. It's my truck. So tell me again what happens. He goes going down the road. So he changed his language from driving to going. So change of language. Okay? Missing pronouns, changing pronouns, distancing language. So it's the language. So I tell police officers, really pay attention to the changing of pronouns, specifically the we, I's, or the I, we's. Because here's the thing, Chris. We tell our story with all our knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I can't unknow what I know that I don't want you to know. Let's just say, for instance, I went hiking this morning and I wasn't alone, but I don't want you to know that. I can't unknow that I wasn't alone. So as I'm talking to you, I'm going to be saying I, but I really know it's we. And the longer you talk to me and the more that you ask me, I guarantee you we is going to slip out. It may be something like, I went down to the beach and I was sitting there watching, and I was just standing there just in awe of the whole lake. And did you catch it? Right? I, because I know it was we. So we tell our story with all our knowledge. And people call those Freudian slips. Well, they're super important, because what you need to know about language is not independent. Nothing comes out of your mouth unless you have Tourette's. Nothing comes out of your mouth that you're not thinking about ahead of time. So don't just think, oh, he just kind of messed up. No, it's very important when you have those, especially with pronouns.
Yeah, and I think for anybody listening to this that is not an investigator and sometimes wonder, why do investigators typically ask the same question multiple times? I think that's one of the main reasons, right? It's you want to know if there's deviations in their answer, but two, if like something's gonna slip, and then three, like if somebody has a certain scenario rehearsed, they're typically going to just stick to that particular pattern. A goes to B to C, and it's going to be very difficult for them to do any other version of that story. And
Right.
then when
Well,
you,
that's an
yeah,
excellent point.
yeah. I know because you know investigating like stage accidents and like people would have it very rehearsed, and it's a perfect example of the way that you mentioned it, distancing themselves from the incident that they reported. But then once you start asking specific questions, like, okay, tell me who was inside the car. That's something they didn't rehearse. But again, if somebody
Right.
was inside the car, they should be able to tell you right away, like, oh yeah, I have my
Absolutely.
sister, my cousin, my mom, my
Yep.
dad, and it should be instant. But that wouldn't happen. That would be like,
You're
okay,
right. And the flow will change. Their
the flow
flow
will
will
change.
change.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
They may back up. They may ask you a question. So it's very important when you're interviewing somebody, you're asking the questions, right?
yeah, yeah,
If they ask you a question, that's a huge red flag.
yeah.
Because
Like,
why are they asking
what,
you a question?
why is this important? Right? It's like
Right,
I'm the one
right,
asking you
right.
questions, right? Yeah,
Yes, yes. Why is this important? Why do you need to know that? Well,
yeah,
that's a red flag. There's a lot of sensitivity there that you need to dig into as an investor. But again, if somebody's an investigator, but if somebody is watching this and they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm not an investigator, but I like these kind of shows. Learning behavioral analysis can help you in every aspect of your life.
yeah,
So I train HR departments, I train bankers, I train salespeople, because knowing what people are really thinking and feeling is a great advantage. I'll show you a scientific study that shows that successful leaders are better at picking up people's body language, and they can adapt their own to change their behavior to get these other people's attention again. But at the very least, think about this. You buy a new car or a used car, you want your best deal? All you got to do is ask the salesperson, is this my best deal? And no matter what comes out of his mouth, you're going to know whether it's your best deal or his best deal, no matter
yeah.
what. So there's a lot of incentives to understanding behavioral analysis. And once you start recognizing these clues and this leakage, they're just going to jump out at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, do we have some wiggle room in the negotiation? They're gonna be like, nah, but their behavior is like, yeah, there's a little bit more,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
now you can
yeah.
press right there, right? Very not too controversial, but there's a myth always of this, and I think it's a good time to clear it up. There's this perception or that women tend to be much more natural in knowing when somebody is, not being truthful
Hmm.
than men. Do you think that that is the case? And if so, why?
You're trying to get me in trouble, aren't you, Chris?
I
I can tell you this.
told
I
you I
can
was
tell
going
you
to ask
this.
you a question
Yeah.
that was going to get
Um,
you in trouble.
so, in my experience of training people all over the country, um, I can tell you that it seems to me that women pick up on the voice and the verbiage better, and men pick up on the physical behaviors better.
Mm,
That's just been my experience. I've had classes where these females are sitting there and they're like, I didn't see that shoulder shrug. I didn't see that contempt. I didn't see that anger look, but I heard what he said, and he said this. I'm like, excellent. So when I give those top five clues that I gave, I'm telling you, if you can get two of those, if you can master two of those, you are going to be 100 times better off than you were before.
yeah.
Behavioral analysis is being able to articulate why somebody's not being truthful with you, why something is very sensitive, and uncovering more information. And that's what it's about.
Yeah. And I think the closest place that somebody could actually practice this, whether they're an investigator or they're not an investigator, is with their spouse, right? If that's somebody that a baseline, you've established a baseline, especially if you've been together for many years,
Right.
when your spouse is deviating from certain behaviors, right? And
Yep.
even if you're like I mean, it's happened to me a couple times, right? I come in and like my wife will ask me, Chris, did you take out the trash yesterday? And I'll say, yeah, I did. And she's like, no, you're lying to me. I'm like, no, I did take it, right? And I'm trying to be conscious of what behaviors not to do so that she doesn't pick on it. But it just seems that as much as I try, my body just does certain
Yeah.
things. And she's like,
Yeah.
no, you typically don't react like this when you're being truthful. And so I think that's a perfect place to be careful with the questions that you're going to ask because you might
Yes. Oh,
be
yeah, I
just
was going to say that. So your limbic brain, again, you cannot control these things. I have micro expressions and I feel them, but I can't control them.
yeah.
So when you ask these questions, it's so we look for consistencies and inconsistencies. Okay, whether it's your voice, whether it's your behavior, and then you do get to know a lot of people. But watch the people on the news. Okay, watch people being interviewed. Even actors will do it. Actors who are trying to play the role will say something. Here's a perfect example. I don't know if you guys know what Dupixent is, right? Dupixent, and by the way, this works on kids. This works on the mentally ill. Okay, these are limbic brain responses that are in our DNA. So when you this Dupixent commercial, it's anti. I don't know if you have psoriasis. Okay, if you
Yeah.
have psoriasis, you put it on there. So here's a little girl on this commercial, and she goes, "Hide my skin, not me." And she has a huge single-sided shoulder shrug. What does that tell me? She doesn't have any confidence in what she just said. Either she doesn't use the product, she definitely doesn't have psoriasis, but she's just doing it for the commercial. She's an actor, but you can't help this stuff. Okay, so these micro expressions, infants do them, blind people do them. They are in our DNA, and they're great road signs to telling us what the people's feelings are, what their
Mm,
emotions are.
yeah. Yeah. What's if you have a case in mind, like is there anything that you remember that you could share where it was a particular situation and being able to analyze behaviors aid you in getting to the bottom of that particular situation?
Sure. So here's one. We're talking about behaviors. We haven't talked about language very much. I did a training in a different state, a southern state, and I was contacted by one of the guys in the class who was part of the internal affairs investigations for a large uh, agency, law enforcement agency. And he goes, Bruce, I've got this statement from a woman that works in the jail, and she's claiming that one of the COs, the corrections officers, did something inappropriate with her while he was scanning her before she comes into work. I go, okay, do you have a statement? He goes, yeah. I go, send it to me. So he sends me the statement. The statement goes something like this. It's not exact by any means because I don't have it in front of me. The statement goes written from the complainant, the female. She goes, I showed up for work and had to get scanned in to work. This was frustrating because CO Smith, we'll call him CO Smith, Corrections Officer Smith, CO Smith was taking his time pretending to arrest women by putting their hands behind their back and scanning them. My turn finally comes. The door pops open. CO Smith scans the body, whispers into my ear something sexual. I'm not going to say it, but something inappropriate. And now I can go home to my wife. I do not appreciate this type of behavior at all, not in the least. I stopped reading. I called him up and I go, she's lying.
Scans
How
the
did I know?
body. That's
There's
kind of weird,
nothing to,
right?
nothing to, right, right. So think about what she said. So she started out, we talk about the balance of statements. So if you ask me to tell you something happened, I should spend 25% of my time talking about how I got there. Nothing happens in a vacuum, right? So I have to explain how I got there. She did that, but she spent a lot more than 25% getting her to the scene. She spent about 15% of that 100% statement, which I stopped reading. I mean, there was another full page of writing on there, but she spent about 12 to 15% of her story about the actual incident, where she should spend 50% of the time on there. Okay, people front load the information. Sometimes they'll tell you 80% of the story before the incident happens, or
Yeah.
vice versa. They'll have a very short beginning or no beginning, just jump right into the meat of the story about the incident, and then give you 80% afterwards. So if I asked you, Chris, what did you do yesterday? Tell me one thing you did yesterday.
I was down in San Diego.
Okay, I was down. So past tense. By the way, you looked up and to your right when you remembered it. So that's your pattern of remembering things, recalling things. Okay, so you said I was in San Diego. Past tense, right? Because we tell the truth in past tense and we lie in present tense. I'll say that again. We tell the truth in past tense and we lie in present tense. Right? You didn't say I'm in San Diego. You said I went to San Diego, or I was in San Diego, past tense. So listen to the statement. Okay. She's talking about how she got there. It's frustrating. She's talking about emotion. She didn't like the way CO Smith was handling these females, pretending to arrest them. My turn finally comes. The door pops open. CO Smith scans the body. Let's talk about that. Scans the body. There's no pronoun. Whose body is it? It's her body. She should
Yeah.
have said, CO Smith scanned with an ED at the end. Past tense. My body. Scans the body. Present tense. Whispers into my ear. Present tense. So we tell the truth in past tense, we lie in present tense. I'm sorry, we tell the truth in past tense, yes, we lie in present tense. She's reliving this. It didn't happen. She's not recalling it. She is living it as it's happened. She's fabricating it.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I do not appreciate this type of behavior at all. Not in the least. So not in the least is unnecessary language. You could take that out and the sentence would mean the same thing.
Hmm.
It's classic of people who are not telling the truth. They will get very wordy. Okay? And I know some people are thinking about, well, I get wordy all the time. It's different. Okay? I
Yeah.
have people who question everything I say. Then I'll go, well, here's the scientific studies that show it. Well, I do that all the time. And I'm like, well, you've been talking to me for almost 8 minutes and you haven't done it once.
Yeah.
Right?
Or the
So some
classic, or
people
the
are,
classic. To be honest with you, right?
oh yeah, right. Or I swear to God, I was an officer for 30 years. And I probably heard that 10,000 times, and 0 times were they ever truthful with me when they said it.
Yeah. Interesting. There's a ton of stuff that goes into, analyzing behavior, analyzing voice, analyzing micro expressions. There's a lot.
Mhm.
And we only have certain limit of time on this episode, but I think it's a good time to share with everybody that if you're listening to this episode and this is something that really interests you, Bruce is our instructor at the National Education Institute of Investigations for Behavioral Analysis, and there's several courses, right, that we have coming up with you, Bruce. Um, some of them, I think it's like a 1 day course. Then we got like a 3 day course, and then there's a more intensive one
So
after
right,
that
so I
one.
do a 1 day beginners, which is an 8 hour course. I do a 3 day intermediate and a 5 day advanced.
Yeah, and so those courses will be coming up, and you can find those on our website. It'll be posted on this episode. But if you're listening to the version of this, you can go to neiiinstitute.com, and the courses will be there. But if they need to reach you directly, Bruce, for anything, maybe
Mhm.
training for their team, or just anything overall, where can they contact you? Where can they find you?
Okay, so it's really easy. We talked about leakage the whole hour here. So my website is www.leakingthetruth.com. My email is bruce@leakingthetruth.com. I have an app now. So if you want to go to the App Store, it doesn't matter what kind of phone you have, and look up, guess what? Leaking the Truth. You're going to see my app. On that app, you can get to my website, you can get to my YouTube channel. I will be doing push outs. So if you have that app, once a week, I'm at least once a week, I'm going to maybe send a still photo and ask you what the dynamics are, what's going on in this photo. Or I may send a 20-second video. So Chris, what we're doing right now with the college is Chris and I, we every week we post a two truths and a lie Tuesday, which is about a 45-second video. And I
Yeah.
have people from all over the country, because I train all over the country, doing the two truths and a lie. And because of their behavior, you have to tell me, or you don't have to, but you can guess which one is the lie based on the behaviors. This is an example of it right here.
Yeah, quick example. So why don't we play it real quick? Let's see here.
Okay.
I have a bachelor in religious studies. Um, I coached middle school volleyball for 2 years, and I was an all-star college soccer player.
All right. Good. All right.
Lips, right?
Yep. Yep. So that's one of the things. What she's doing is called lip sucking. All right. When people who are lying, they talk, and a lot of times people don't like to lie. So they'll close their lips. It's the only time she did it while she was talking. She also had different hand movements when she was lying. It's obviously it's the last one about being the all-star soccer player. Okay. Um, Again, if you download the app, you're going to get these push outs and notifications to go to the YouTube channel. These will be posted in YouTube. I'll also link them to LinkedIn to the LinkedIn post.
It's almost interesting too when you slow them down, right? How you could
Mhm.
see like their micro expression, just like,
Yep. And I tell people, if you have a video, watch it without the sound once. So many people are concentrating on what they say uh, instead of watching everything. So break it down. If it's too much for you to watch and listen at the same time, do it without the sound. And you'll see stuff. It's like, well, what do you think's being said? And I'll do that for some of my trainings. I'll turn the sound off and I'll have this politician or athlete or whatever talking. Like, what do you think's going on here? Well, he's mad at that and he doesn't believe that. And so then I'll put the sound in, and it's amazing of what they picked up without the sound.
yeah,
But
yeah,
sometimes we can't do that. I mean, if you're talking to somebody face to face, you don't have time. You can't do that. So you pick up what you can. And if you concentrate on those five things, even if you get two of those five, you're going to be so much better off.
yeah. There's just so much to to look for. But this is really interesting stuff, and like you mentioned, we do push out those two truths and a lie on LinkedIn through our institute page. And that's even an easy way, right? That if you don't want to take a full course, but you just want to just practice that on a weekly, you can go there,
Yep.
and those are for free. And you could look at these people telling two truths and a lie, And the more and more you analyze that, then you can start picking out like, oh, I see this is the lie and that's the deviation.
Yeah.
And the more and more they do it, like
Seasoning,
it's just going to catch on it. Yeah.
right? Right. Chris, I believe that we're going to put some smaller courses on too. So there may be an hour course or 2 hour course to kind of pique your interest in what's out there. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, human behavior is amazing, and it's like a superpower, knowing what other people's feelings are and what they're thinking.
Yeah, we do have a webinar. I'm glad that you brought that up. We do have a webinar coming up at the end of February. We have it scheduled for February 28th, 2024. In case somebody's listening to this after that date. But yeah, that's gonna be pushed out, and those are gonna be great too, right? It's a quick, 1 hour training. A little bit obviously more in depth than this. This is more of a just talking about what behavior is, but that will be actual training and some things to look for and have more visuals. So awesome. Well, it was great having you on the show, Bruce. It's
Yeah,
always
thanks for having me.
amazing. It's always amazing working with you and developing all of this content for everybody. Like you said, this doesn't just apply to investigators, right? There's a ton of people out there that could, I think almost anybody could benefit
Well,
from
anybody could,
being
right?
able to assess behavior, whether it's just like you said, a car salesman, whether it's, with your kids, your spouse, HR, your employees. There's always benefit in understanding the full conversation, not just what somebody in context is telling you, but what their body and their voice and their pitch is actually telling you. And you can dig a little deeper in those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. And
Okay.
any last
And
remarks
again,
for the audience?
my yep, my website, leakingthetruth.com, my email, Bruce at leakingthetruth.com, my app, Leaking the Truth.
Yep. And we'll make sure to add those on the comments so that people have them there as well. And if they want to, they can reach out to you directly too.
Great.
Awesome. Well, this was
All right.
great.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chris.
Bruce, for joining us. And yep, thanks everyone for listening in.
All right.